Hi, I'm Lucy. I'm an alcoholic. It's good to be here tonight. Thank you, Kirk, for asking me to speak. And thank you, Mike. Um, I was thinking during the cigarette break that it's incredible to me that our stories don't have a whole lot in common on the surface. And when I was new, that would have totally freaked me out and sent me into this tailspin of comparison and feeling like, well, if my story doesn't sound like his, then that means that maybe I'm not an alcoholic, which means maybe I can leave and not do this work. But today I'm really grateful that I know that my story is my story, your story is yours. They might not have all the details in common, but we're all here for the same purpose. So thank you for having me tonight. So my sobriety date is July 10th, 2017. I'll be celebrating, I still celebrate months, like it makes me excited. So I'm excited that I'm coming up on 2.5 years in January. And that just blows my mind because I remember sitting in one of these seats when I was new, and a friend of mine that I had made early in sobriety she was speaking, and she was like 2 years sober, and I remember being just mind blown that she was able to come up here and be so honest about everything that she had been through, and mind blown that she had more than 2 years and was around my age. And it's really cool to be in this position now. I'm really grateful to be celebrating that amount of time, and I celebrate every day, really, because I did not expect to love this lifestyle as much as I do. I'll get started. I was born in New Jersey, or I was born in New York, raised in New Jersey, and unlike Mike, like my home life growing up was actually, compared to a lot of people I know, it was like very stable. I grew up with 2 parents, house, dog, cat, whatever. I was a good student. I had all these extracurriculars. I was a dancer. I did well. I was kind of that good kid, the one that like nobody was really worried about, I think. Around like 12, 13, 14 years old though, like something shifted, and for whatever reason I was like unsatisfied with being that person, and I wanted to try on a new identity. And so around freshman year of high school, I like totally changed my group of friends, changed the way I dressed, changed everything. And that's right around the time that I got my first opportunity to drink. I should back up a little bit. I was raised in a family where alcohol really wasn't in the house. My mom got sober before I was born, and my dad didn't really drink. So when I say I drank at the first opportunity, I mean like the first time that alcohol was around, I was like, I want to know what this is about. And so it was a Sweet 16, or some older girl was having a Sweet 16, and I was a freshman in high school, and somebody poured me like a screwdriver, and I downed it, having no idea how drunk I was about to get, and I loved the feeling, so I went into the kitchen and poured myself like a whole glass of vodka and drank that, and then poured another drink that looked like the drink that I had before. I was already being like super sneaky and stealthy, and drank that, and I, of course got like totally shit hammered, and ended up puking, and like someone drove me home, and I puked in this woman's husband's clothes, and like I got brought home to my parents and spent the whole night like just, I felt like I was dying, but of course that didn't stop me. I did drink again at the next opportunity, and the one after that, and the one after that. I recently had the opportunity to talk to some of my high school friends to kind of ask them like what their perspective was on how we partied in high school, because I was curious if like from a non-alcoholic's perspective, if it like looked different, if it was just me. But they agreed, like we just started binge drinking right away. Like there was no other reason to be drinking other than to get as drunk as possible. So that was totally the norm for me. It started with just Fridays and Saturdays, but as soon as like Friday hit, we would spend all this time and energy like trying to get alcohol for the weekend. And there was this dude, Scuba Steve, who like was a senior, one of those guys that looks like he was 40, so like he would buy alcohol for like the whole high school. and it was a race to get to him, and we would pay these like crazy prices for 40s and like maybe a bottle of Bacardi or something. But I just know, like from the get-go, like I loved the feeling that alcohol gave me, that the ease and comfort, but also I don't know, I truly felt like it allowed me to like be myself or something. I felt like it was my ticket to connection with other people. Like I stopped caring so much. Y'all know this. But I associated it with like the sense of freedom and the sense of like independence and maybe maturity, and like, I don't know, it was like very, very appealing. So what started with the weekends by the end of high school was definitely like already as many nights of the week as possible, and when I didn't have alcohol, I would smoke weed or whatever. It was like trying to be not sober as often as possible. And in retrospect, I can see that even though at that point in my life I did still kind of have the choice to like whether to drink or not, whether to start drinking, I never ever have had an off switch. I've never had the ability to moderate or like limit my intake of substances once I start. So even in high school, that got me in a lot of like really gnarly situations, and I started blacking out really early, drunk driving, getting in trouble, all the things. And I know that like by the end of, this still doesn't make sense to me in terms of like the timeline of how I see my alcoholism, but I know that I was a senior in high school when I went to my first AA meeting. Like I took a train to New York City because I didn't want to go to a meeting in my hometown, but I was already like, I just had this feeling that like there was something really different about the way that I drank and the shit that would happen when I started drinking. And I already knew that I just had no control. So I went to a meeting, and I just had that feeling deep within myself that like I'm gonna end up here. I identified already with people's stories and with how they described like the way that they were feeling, but I just knew I'm not even 18. Like there's no way that I'm gonna give this up now. There's no way that I can picture myself as a young person without drinking. So I graduated from high school, and I decided to go to college like as far away from home as possible, which is what brought me out to Prescott. I found this school, Prescott College, and I think I had this like unconscious belief that if I came out here and went to Prescott College, it was like a bunch of hippies. They like spent time in the woods and like did yoga and like had this really balanced like lifestyle, that like somehow that would become me, like that I could slip into that life. But that was truly not the case. What happened was, within like a month of being out here, I went on a trip to San Diego, and it ended up being me and a bottle of Sailor Jerry like on the beach, which then led to me like walking into the Pacific Ocean, I think trying to kill myself. Within a couple months, I was in the hospital with alcohol poisoning. That happened a few times. But because I moved here and we didn't have dorms, so I just got to move in with a bunch of friends for the first time. And so there was no limits any longer on when it was appropriate to drink. Like I just was messed up as often as possible. So that turned into every day, and like I found the group of people who were not the ones like rock climbing and doing yoga and like eating organic food. I found all the people like me who just wanted to get fucked up. And there's no need to get into the details. It was just 4 years of like me just feeling that alcohol and alcoholism was like really taking a hold of me over those years. The blackouts became more consistent. I would find myself in these like really horrifying positions. It's vulnerable to talk about, but I woke up so many times in places that I didn't know where I was. I didn't know who I was with. I didn't know what had happened. And those are those memories that, like, since getting sober, like, I know that I'm still living the impacts of those things, even though I wasn't consciously there to remember it. And there was just countless events like that where I just was, like, sinking into this despair. I felt completely isolated. Alcohol wasn't working for me anymore as far as, like, finding that, like, social connection or finding that confidence in myself. I was just drinking to get blackout as quick as possible. And still at the same time, I was going to school and I was studying religion of all things in school. Because I think that even through all those years, like, there was this part of me that was seeking some sort of solution. There was some part of me that wanted meaning in my life and wanted to understand, like, how to live right. And, like, how are people out here finding purpose and meaning and connection on this planet right now, because I'm not feeling that. But it was so hard for me to put anything that I was learning into practice in my own life. Like, I would have assignments from my professors to, like, practice meditating every day. And instead of meditating for, like, the 5 minutes that they were asking me to meditate, I would get messed up, and then at the end of the semester, I would forge a meditation log. Or another good example is I went to Spain and walked this pilgrimage where you walk literally across the whole country of Spain. It's a spiritual pilgrimage that people have been taking for thousands of years. And I went into it with the best intentions, and what ended up happening was I got severe alcohol poisoning and ended up in the hospital in Spain with tachycardia because my heart was like, I felt like my heart was going to explode. So there was this huge disconnect between, like, the person that I wanted to be and the type of life that I wanted to live and that meaning and that purpose that I was looking for, and the life that I was living every day. Because the life I was living every day was real simple. It was just wake up, do what I have to do, and then spend the rest of the day forgetting myself and forgetting my circumstances and forgetting who I am. By the end of college, I really don't know how I graduated, but I did, and I remember it was the worst feeling. It was like I just felt terrible about myself. I was starting to experience that sense of self-loathing that then, like, followed me for years and years. But I remember at that point, like, making a commitment to myself to learn how to show up, because I knew, like, I'm not going to ever be the person that I'm trying to be if I'm not, like, making some changes in my life. And I knew that I needed to learn how to show up, because I was that person that was so inconsistent, not accountable, would tell you I'd be somewhere and would never be there. Like, and I just felt like that was maybe the thing that I needed to tackle next. So I left, I graduated and I got a job and another, and I was trying to put one foot in front of the other. I was trying to become a better human being, but by that point, I was in a relationship with someone who was just as sick as I was, and I was living in a house full of people who were as sick, if not sicker than me, and we were all just feeding off of each other. And I can't even explain the feeling, but it was just that, like, slow motion, like water going down the drain, sinking feeling for the next few years. And by that point, I basically couldn't drink without blacking out. I couldn't drink without making myself incredibly sick. I was showing up to work, but I was showing up to work hungover every day. I was feeling that, like, life force within me just dwindle, and that will to live just, like, evaporating. And I don't know how much longer that would have gone on. I felt like I knew where it was headed because, like I said, my mom was a sober alcoholic, and she had talked to me enough about her life that I knew that my story was paralleling her story. I knew where I was headed. I knew alcoholism was progressive. And yet I couldn't figure out how to get out of it, and I wasn't even sure that I wanted to. Because again, that thought always came up for me of like, how am I supposed to stop drinking? How am I supposed to be a 20-something-year-old who doesn't drink alcohol, who doesn't party? Like, I had no clue because my entire life was built on this foundation. That's how I related to people. That's how I coped with all of my feelings. That's how I coped with my crazy-ass, loud mind. So I was in that place of every morning waking up, hating myself, thinking a lot about, I had this like thought that would be just looping through my head about my own funeral. I don't know if anyone else ever did that, but like, who would come to my funeral when I do inevitably die young, and what are they going to say, and all that, like, I don't know. But every morning I would wake up, hate myself, tell myself I was not going to do it again, tell myself I wasn't going to drink for that night or that day, or that I was going to try to take a week off of drinking, or maybe just a couple days, or, you know, it was always changing, but every day I would get through whatever I had to do, and then I would go, on my drive home, I would find myself driving to the liquor store, and then getting annihilated and waiting for my boyfriend to get back from his job at a liquor store, where he would bring home a bottle of old Overholt whiskey, and then I would drink until I passed out, and then wake up the next morning and go to my job. What ended up happening, I never could have planned, never would have wished upon this boyfriend or upon myself, but it turned out to be exactly what I think needed to happen to wake me up. He ended up he had been dealing with like liver problems for a while, and then he found out he had gout, and then he called me one night. I was out drinking, and he said, I got to go to the hospital right now. I'm in the most excruciating pain I've ever been in. And I drove him to the ER, found out that he had acute pancreatitis, which I'm told is some of the worst pain that a person can be in. And so it's like the middle of the night, he's in the ER. I know that as a good human being, I'm supposed to like be there and be like holding his hand and like being supportive. But I had already started drinking, and like I said, I do not have an off switch. So I just kept leaving the ER to go to C-Stop, to get more alcohol, to drink in the parking lot, then throw up, then drink more, then go into the ER room for a second, then leave and get more alcohol. And I don't know how many times I repeated that super long night. But he ended up getting flown down to Phoenix, and he was there for like a week. And it like, I mean, I felt awful about myself that really put it in perspective. Like, if you can't stop drinking for this, just in this moment, you can't stop for the next few hours, like, you're really screwed. And when he got out of the hospital, he started coming to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, which I found terribly inconvenient, because we were each other's primary drinking buddies. And when he got sober, and he started bringing like his AA friends like over to the house, and I'm like hiding all my stuff, like trying to be, you know, a stable human being, and having that mirror reflect back to me like how messed up I was. It did a number on me. So I had another bout of binge drinking, and when I came out of it, I just remember him looking at me like, you ready? Like, you know what you have to do. You know you have to stop drinking. Are you ready? Are you willing to give this a shot? And I said yes. I was drunk off my ass, but I said yes in that moment. And then the next morning was my 24th birthday, and it was my first day sober, and I wanted to take it all back. But I went to my first meeting, not on my birthday, but the next day. And I remember talking to my mom before I went to the meeting, and I'm like, I just don't know that I can go. I don't know that I'm an alcoholic. And she's like, Lucy, the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't know that I have a desire to stop drinking. After finally admitting to my innermost self, that voice was still there, like, maybe this isn't as bad as you think. Maybe you can just slow down. How are you going to do this? How are you going to live without alcohol? But I went to the meeting. I went to the damn meeting, and I just kept going. I didn't go to treatment. I just like really threw myself into AA as fully as I could. I jumped in with both feet. And of course I had reservations. I did a lot of the comparing and contrasting that I was talking about earlier. A lot of moments where I was questioning, well, my story really doesn't sound like theirs. I didn't end up homeless. I didn't end up without a job. I still have a relationship. I still have all these things in my life, so it can't be that bad. But once I worked that first step, I got a sponsor maybe like 3 or 4 weeks into sobriety. I worked my first step and really took an honest look at how I was powerless over alcohol and how my life had become unmanageable. And really, I think from that point on, I couldn't hide the truth from myself anymore. Like I had seen that I was an alcoholic, and I had to admit to my innermost self that that was not going to change, that no amount of promising to slow down or to stop for a while was going to change the fact that I was an alcoholic and that I had never had any control over my drinking, and that when I had tried to stop drinking, I never could. So I realized that's what I had to do. I had to start taking suggestions from people in the rooms. And I feel really lucky that, you know, the boyfriend at that time was also trying to get sober. And he took me to some meetings and introduced me to a lot of people, and a lot of people introduced themselves to me. And I started going almost every day. I got a sponsor, and I started working the steps. I just started doing all the things that they suggested to me. And things did, like I relate to what Mike said around, like, it's not like my life got better right away. I still have moments now, 2.5 years in, I still have days where I'm like, oh, this is exactly why I drank. Because I hate the way that I feel right now, and I would do anything to not feel this way. And of course I had tons of moments like that in my first few months of sobriety, in my first year of sobriety, and all the time since then. There are moments where I felt like I needed a drink. I felt like I needed an out. I felt like I needed to do anything that I could to change the way that I felt in that moment. But what I started to find is that freedom and that relief that I thought I got from alcohol wasn't real, because it always led to further despair and misery and pain and suffering. Whereas when I started to take the suggestions of people in the rooms, I noticed that what they were suggesting, prayer, meditation, service, journaling, inventory, going to a meeting, spending some time talking with other alcoholics who understood my mind, all of those things actually did provide relief. And that relief was not followed by consequences. It was followed by more sense of strength, of trust in myself, of a sense of peace, a sense of like genuine optimism or hope, and trust in the process. And so, yeah, I don't know. That's what I've been doing, and I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, of course it's been hard. Like, in the first year of sobriety, that boyfriend that I thought I was getting sober with, he turns out was not on a real linear path, and had to do some more research again and again, and I had to go through the really difficult decision of telling him that he had to leave our apartment, that we couldn't be together anymore, that we couldn't live together anymore. And I did not want to do that. I didn't think it would be right to leave this person when he was in his sickness, when he hadn't left me when I was in mine. But I had friends in the program who walked me through that process and showed me that me not taking that action of asking him to leave was going to do nothing but enable him and nothing but prevent him from experiencing the pain that he needed to experience and hitting the bottom that he needed to hit. And thank God for that, because I never would have made that decision on my own, but I can see in hindsight that that is exactly what he needed. And today, he's over a year sober, and we're good friends. And I've never been able to say that before about an ex or someone who I've been through that much shit with, you know? And many people have died since I've gotten sober, and I've watched a lot of people leave. I've watched a lot of people go back to drinking. I've watched a lot of people come in and out, and I've gone through my own hardships. I've gone through my own mental obsessions, not around drinking, but around anything else, around relationships, around future tripping, around, so many different struggles have come up in the last few years, but the way that I have been taught to get through them, the suggestions that I've taken, and especially the principles of this program are what have given me the framework for how to live a life. And it's really extraordinary how much I can see that I've changed now. I volunteered for something recently, and the woman who I volunteered for wrote me a message saying, "Thank you for being someone that one can count on." And I was like, excuse me? I've never heard that before. And little moments like that, moments where I can work with another suffering alcoholic and I can offer my experience, strength, and hope with them and sit with them in their misery, offer suggestions, and watch them grow and watch their lives change, that is extraordinary. The fact that I've learned so much about how to be in healthy relationship to myself and to other people, the fact that I feel a part of a community, the fact that I live my life based on spiritual principles, these are all things that I never knew how to have in my life before. Like I said, I always had this disconnect between the person that I wanted to be and the person that I was on the ground every day. And now with time, those two are coming closer and closer to being one and the same, which is not to say that I don't have a shitload of room for growth, but that I feel all right with myself today. I feel at peace with myself today. I can talk about my past and I can see how it can be useful to another human being. I can transform the pain that I've been through and make it into something that can be a light for someone else. These are all incredible things. I was talking to a friend earlier who, isn't done. She's not ready to be in recovery, or she's not ready to be sober right now. And I asked her, she said she didn't want to go to meetings anymore. And I said, why? And she said, it just feels like, it's taking away my freedom. And I was like, girl, the freedom to do what? The freedom to destroy your life? The freedom to do harm to everyone around you? The freedom to be in your sickness? What freedom are you talking about out there? Because I know that for me, the only freedom that I've found in life is in here. It's through doing the hard work of being honest with myself, of looking at my past, of righting my wrongs, of trying to live a day at a time with as much integrity as possible. That's where the freedom lies for me. Not in a drink, not in a drug, not in any type of crazy psychedelic spiritual experience, but right here in the day, in the moment, in the struggles, in the small joys and successes of living a different way and learning to be the person that I do think that I am meant to be. I think that's all I have tonight. Thank you all so much for being here.
Yep. Thanks, Lucy. This has been a regular meeting of the Rarely Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. You're cordially invited to join us next week. Please bring a friend. There are approximately 100 meetings of AA each week in the Prescott area. We advise that you attend as many as possible, and we hope you'll join us again soon. After the prayer, will the people who volunteered to do that stuff, and your court cards are in the back right corner with Kirk. Let's circle up and say the Lord's Prayer. Thank you all for coming.